Okay, so good, then we start. I would like to start by welcoming you. My name is Målkvist. I'm Director of Center for Health and Sustainability, which is a collaborating partner in these Exist seminars on environmental humanities, together with CEMUS and the Center for Religion and Society. And this is the third seminar this semester. Now it's CHS turn. And we have now Oleksandra Khalaim, who will talk about emotions in sustainability education, as you can see from the title here. So very much welcome on behalf of us organizers. And over to you, Oleksandra.
Thank you. Thank you, Mats. Yeah, we have very little time, only 45 minutes. That makes me sad from the very beginning, because I'm looking forward to have an interesting discussion about emotional labor and emotions in education with you. We are going to touch upon, dive into the concept of emotional labor, what is that, and how it is problematized in academia, in higher educational institutions. Then I will share a little bit of my insights of my project, a research project about climate emotions and sustainability studies. And then we can a little bit discuss and see what kind of consequences for practice we can have and ways out of the problematic situation with neglecting emotions in academia. So I tried to design this session in a way to hear from you as much as possible, to make it interactive. So we will see how it goes. But we will start with basics, and basics are definitions. I have found this kind of sad and funny meme somewhere in the internet that says I was feeling really tired and moody lately. I Googled my symptoms, and it turns out I'm a postdoc. And that is kind of manifests a little bit the emotional part of us working in academia. And I wanted to ask you, how do you understand what is emotional labor about? What is that? You can just feel free, Zoom people unmute, or people in the room just say something in loud. How do you understand this concept, or have you heard that before, the idea of emotional labor, this concept?
I've never heard about it, but I would say I can say
You
that.
can say that.
Okay.
Knowledge is work.
I've never heard about it, but I would assume that it's kind of an emotional charge or something, maybe like a crisis or anxiety that people can have why they're studying some things, especially sustainability.
Yeah, thank you. We also have some comments in the chat. Taking care of others' feeling, making others feel okay, balanced, managing own emotions in relation to work pressure. Yeah, the last comment is getting us closer to the original definition of it, handling emotions in a professional context. Yes. Yeah. Yes, Mats.
Yeah, I think to me it's a lot about harboring and your emotions, if that's the right word in English, härbärgera, to maintain your emotions and handle them, to live with uncertainty and live with risk a little bit. But I don't. That's my interpretation.
I would connect it to kind of the classical female or motherly role of kind of managing others' emotions. But I have no idea if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting that you have mentioned mother's role and females. So the original definition of
Can I come in? Can I come in?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see everyone very well.
You cannot
so
see me
can...
because my camera is in strike.
Okay.
I'm Azrin. Basically, it's feeling your feelings. And that means learning how feelings make sense, make the music in our body. And I think as we enter the academic space, we leave this package out and we are just minds.
Mm-hmm. So since the word labor is presented in this concept, the original definition of emotional labor that has been produced by Arlie Hochschild, she is professor in the University of California, and she kind of introduced this concept in 1983. So it says that emotional labor is the management of feeling to create a publicly observable facial and bodily display that is sold for wage. So in other words, it's invisible work of managing our emotions to meet the demands of our job. So in 1983, she early estimated that close to 1/3 of all jobs in the United States possessed elements of emotional labor, disproportionately impacting women working in the service sector. So mostly, like originally, emotional labor as a concept was related to service professions, waitress, bank officers, like any profession that is dealing with hosting other people. And yes, it was interesting that you mentioned females in this regard, because it is have been proven by different research that gender aspect of emotional labor is a very big problematic, and women are exposed to emotional labor more than men in service sector. This is the original idea of emotional labor as a concept. And it is interesting to see how it is positioned in academia, in higher education. And surprisingly, in academia, it has been researched as extensively as in other fields, in industry, in service sector, and so on and so forth. Because we tend to conflate emotional labor with professionalism. So we view it as natural and expected part of our job. When we are teaching, we need to have the service smile with us. And we think it is part of our professional face, and we are not then recognized and try to claim for compensation for that. But I want to read in loud the citation of Avita Rath. She's a practicing doctor and a student of University of Edinburgh, and she made a blog in the university teaching, made a post in the university teaching blog about it. And that is kind of unfolding the problematic of emotional labor in academia. So she says, behind the carefully crafted smiles, the reassuring words, and the meticulously managed demeanor lies a silent toll, a heavy burden we carry. In academia, we're often expected to suppress our true selves, conform to a narrow definition of professionalism, and mask the real emotions that shape our experiences. This unseen, rarely acknowledged labor is a storm brewing beneath the surface of our work, threatening to drown us in a sea of burnout and exhaustion. I really, really like these words because they kind of unfold the problematic of emotional labor in academia. And there are different aspects of it. Firstly, as I said, like what are universities and academic institutions originally from the very beginning, from medieval times? Universities were science providers and education providers. And nowadays, due to marketization, it depends on the country, of course, but in many countries, universities has transformed into service institutions. So now we are very much solidly part of a service sector of our economies. So we are expected to provide service. And academics are increasingly expected to cater to the needs of students and stakeholders. And that is why the question is, are we supposed to smile at work? Another problematic that has been brought by Arlie initially is related to feeling rules. And that is also an interesting concept by itself. She claims that feeling rules are emotional guides that are socially specific. So feeling rules are present when we question our own emotions, when we are asked to give an account for our own feelings by another, or when we are criticized by another, how we show our emotions. So she says that feeling rules are differentially distributed by social status, class, and most importantly by gender. There are different feeling expectations based on group membership. Women in particular are required to do more emotional work, including commercialized emotional work, as we have already mentioned before. And last but not least, it has been claimed that emotions and emotional labor in academia, it leads to burnout and quiet quitting when academicians, they still perform their duties, but they emotionally distance themselves from what they are doing. I'm very curious in how you personally relate to this problematic that I have super quickly introduced. But before, no, maybe actually we'll do it now and then we come back to that previous slide. So my question to you now is, what types of emotional labor do you experience in your academic work? For example, I can really relate to emotional burnout, especially in sustainability-related studies. I'm a teacher. We have a master program that is in implementation, transformative learning, and sustainability. So it's a very interdisciplinary master program. It is a combination of students who are coming from all over the world with different professional backgrounds, different social status, different countries of origin. And then sometimes when we discuss wicked global problems like climate change, sometimes it's becoming very emotionally sensitive, especially when students bring their own personal or professional experiences and discuss it all together. And these sessions that I need to facilitate as a teacher, they can be really, really emotionally exhausting for me. So this is something that I can bring from myself, for example. But I'm really curious, what kind of experiences do you have in relation to that?
Come in?
Yes.
Is a kind of a norm that you're supposed to feel well, that if you have emotional noises, you're supposed to deal with them outside of academia, not in the space of academia. It's like the question in Swedish or in English, allt gott, everything is good. You're not supposed to be able to say, it's an implied pressure to say, yeah, allt gott, yeah, everything is fine.
Yes, and then we hide our emotional labor, basically, our internal emotional work behind this allt gott, all good formal status. Yeah, we have something in the chat, trying to appear calm, collected, organized, confident, etc.
I comment on also on the tweet you had there on being a postdoc. I think what makes, all professions and all workplaces have their stress level, of course, and their demands, and you have to deal with that. As a medical doctor, you have a lot of maybe tragedy, hard decisions, these things. In academia, what makes academia special, I think, is maybe this demand of producing and achieving, and always being judged and merited, and you have to be evaluated. It's a very, very much evaluated condition. I was in the US teaching some years ago, and then they talked about effortless perfection. That students wanted to project that nothing was hard, but they were just super talented and they did this without effort. And that was really emotional labor for them. It was very stressful to suppress that. And I think that makes academia very special.
Yeah.
Just compared to other, maybe, well, I don't know, the business might have the same problem, but where the service sector might be other types of emotional labor.
It's an interesting expression. What I relate to, Oleksandra, is I think when you meet a lot of students, I mean, in the student meeting, especially these difficult questions, although it is definitely emotional labor, I haven't thought about it like that. But then it's the part of my work that I enjoy the most. So does emotional labor have to be a negative experience? To me, it's what makes our work meaningful in a way. I feel meaningful by being able to, maybe not if someone is sad or crying, but to be able to take care of people a little bit. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. And I can mention in relation to that emotional labor, yes, it's like problematized in scientific literature, but also some researchers, they say absolutely the same thing as you have said, that emotional labor is a beautiful thing, and it's like part of the academic work that we should enjoy. But then there are a lot of questions on how we recognize emotional labor in academia and how we host it, and are we trained or are we capable enough to managing our emotions, because this is essential skill that needs to be in place. And in this regard, we don't have any system that is hosting or helping us to host and manage our emotions. We have quite an interesting discussion in the chat as well. I don't know if you can see the chat, or should I quickly read some things? Yeah, so it's about work with students, make sure students mostly flow through their educational trajectory, keep them satisfied, managing high pressure while staying focused, feeling sad about the state of the world, and still tapping into my strengths and hope to keep students empowered. Yeah, it's very hard combination of factors. I can absolutely relate to that, Valentina, myself. Emotional labor is not the interaction with emotions of students, but the expectations from the university about how we should deal with the emotions. Exactly. That is also part of the issue. So there is a group of researchers from Canada who tried to answer this question in more systemic way. And they have posted this list of emotional labor in academia. So it's emotional caretaking of students related to issues of student well-being and mental health. And a little bit jumping to some of my insights from my research, what I have heard from students doing interviews with them about climate anxiety, they more and more request teachers to be mentors, not only knowledge providers, but mentors in their educational evolution over years of doing their studies. And then emotional caretaking of colleagues, managing issues of academic integrity, mentoring students, research assistants, early career faculty and colleagues, service work that involves managing distributions of resources or other contentious issues, advancing equity, diversity, inclusion, decolonization work, concluding research on emotionally challenging topics. That is, I also can relate, because when I was doing my research on climate anxiety, it was a lot of self-reflection on me as an academician who is also teaching climate change and other weak sustainability problematic, diving into these very inconvenient statistics on how our world is falling apart. And I think all CEMUS teachers can really relate to that, because you are very much dealing with these topics on a daily basis. Any more comments on can you relate to any of those points in this list? Have you ever supported your colleagues in the corridor at work, sharing your frustrations about the next failed VR application or something that you have spent lots of months to write?
I think these definitions are quite external. It's more therapeutic. Maybe not so much introspective in this definition, like what I have to do, like where you started with the service smile. That's more like what I have to manage my own. This is more about managing others.
Yeah, but still it's part of unrecognized job duties, kind of. Of course, you can distance yourself emotionally from your colleagues and your students and everyone. But it is kind of that what we are not formally are expected in academia. So we enter the door of our office and then we expected to do these things, or no, from this list.
This we expected of ourselves.
Yeah, or is it also to be human and compassionate? I mean, taking care of colleagues and students who have failed the VR. I mean, that's not really a work duty. That's a life duty.
But it's more of a duty for some than others, though, in that case. How it works now.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, meeting someone in the corridor. Yeah, of course, it's also as an employer representative.
Yeah, like who organizes the Christmas dinner, who writes a card to the person who is turning 50, or who is emptying the dishwasher. I'm assuming those are issues in this kind of the in-between work.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you're...
No, but that's also part of life. I mean, that's the same in homes. Who's writing the Christmas cards and all those things.
But then at the same time, since we are service institutions, then we are emotionally exposed in like doing our straightforward job. And then this like emotional labor in the corridor. So in general, if to compare academic life with, I don't know, working in industry as an engineer in a factory, for example, I think we are more exposed to emotional labor in this regard. And we have very little evidence how it actually works, because there is very, very little empirical studies on emotional labor in academia. And in this regard, I want to come back to this slide. I tried to see what kind of emotional labor related research we have in Sweden, and I haven't found any essential research about emotional labor in academia. There is a couple of research, for example, this one that you can see in the slide that has recently started in University of Edinburgh, about principles of high schools and their emotional labor and volatile times, because now Swedish school system and like everything is faced to different challenges related to the wicked world that we are living in. So this is something that is coming, and then there was research on emotional labor and crime prevention made by Kristianstad and Linnaeus universities. Uppsala University has been researching emotional labor in court in 2012-2016. And then University of Malmö is currently running a research about emotional labor in Swedish welfare organizations. But still, it's a huge research gap on emotional labor in academia. That is something that we potentially maybe should think about as being researchers ourselves. There was a scoping review made by a group of researchers. They have identified initially more than 900 papers and then made in-depth analysis of 20 of them. And here you can see a mapping of emotions, emotional and psychological responses related to emotional labor in academia, done by different research groups worldwide. And speaking about problematic of emotional labor, yes, it can be a beautiful thing, but so far it has been mapped many negative emotions related to emotional labor in academia, such as emotional exhaustion, feeling of insecurity, uncertainty, stress, worry, anxiety, tension, demotivation, depression, loneliness, impatience, giving up, feeling, humiliation, self-disclosure, and so on and so forth. And if to speak about emotions and narrowing down and transitioning to my little research that I did, we know that emotions in academia, they are very much related to wicked problems that we teach and study. And one of the wicked problems is climate change, that is super difficult to navigate and is out of our control, unfortunately, as we know. And I'm sure many of you have already seen that emotional mapping made by Panu Pikala and his colleagues and published in a paper of 2022 towards taxonomy of climate emotions, climate emotion wheel. And here as well, similarly to those emotions mapped previously in relation to emotional labor in academia, here you can see that 3/4 of emotions in this emotion wheel, they are kind of negative emotions. So it's different emotions related to anger, sadness, and fear. And then you have 1/4 that is related to positive emotions like gratitude, hope, inspiration, empowerment, and so on and so forth. And that is interesting to see that that my research is kind of ended up with the similar mapping of what students feel in relation to climate change while studying it and studying sustainability-related studies, because mostly they are expressing negative emotions, but they have a little bit of hope and a little bit of inspiration, a little bit eagerness to fight the problem. So in 2021-2024, I got funding from Medfarm Science Area to map perceptions and attitudes towards climate anxiety of students from sustainability-related study fields in Uppsala University Campus Gotland. So I was asking myself, and we did it, actually we extended it to compare what students feel in Uppsala University with what students feel in University of Warsaw, in University of Helsinki. So we did a comparison study with these 3 universities as well under this research. So what do the students feel, how they position climate anxiety among other anxiety sources, and what needs do they express in relation to coping? And this is also part of emotional labor that in academia that students facing in contrary what we as academic staff are facing. So I did some data collection with cross-cut online surveys for these 3 universities that I have been mentioning, and then some in-depth interviews with students and teachers in Uppsala University and the University of Warsaw. I was talking to student health services in 3 universities, Stockholm, Malmö, and Uppsala, and also was trying to see what do they show in their web pages in terms of if they're mentioning climate anxiety as a problem. And then I will not show all the results, but some super quickly. So those 157 students, respondents from 3 universities, from Helsinki, Warsaw, and Uppsala, they are mainly studying sustainable development. They are mainly young people, mainly from Europe, and they have shown explicitly that climate anxiety is something that they really distinguish from other sources of anxiety. So they were asked to indicate from 1 to 5 how much they are worried in relation to social political issues, personal life, university studies, what kind of the overall anxiety over the past year has been in place, and if they worried about climate change. So climate anxiety has been statistically differentiated from other anxiety sources. So it exists among students, among our respondents. And then if to remember this emotional mapping related to emotional labor in academia, and then in relation to climate change. So our respondents, they have more or less the same distribution, with feeling sad, angry, guilty, frustrated, hopeless in relation to climate change. But at the same time, they feel eager and they express some hope. They also mostly see climate change related emotional state as a mixture of both stressing state that drains their energy and as a call to action that empowers and motivates them. And then, so that is interesting by itself, and it is kind of in line what Pano Pikala is describing in his paper towards taxonomy of climate emotions, that mostly most of his respondents, they were also have this mixture of different emotional response to climate change that is both empowering and stressing state at the same time. And in terms of thematic analysis, and that is something that is actually very much related to emotional labor. We did this reflexive thematic analysis of students' answers of the interviews with my colleague from Warsaw University, Magdalena, and we have identified a couple of themes. And the first main theme is that climate anxiety is multi-faced and it has diverse temporal trajectories. So students, they say that it is not always acute anxiety, but sometimes it's very harsh and very acute. It is something that they highly normalize. It's not something that the weird people go, but it is super normal. It flows from values of empathy and care. So when you care, then you get climate anxiety as a result of your care. Then they also connect it to motivation and motivation to action. Then we can again relate and recall this climate emotions wheel, where we have so climate anxiety can be actually emotion that can help students to, not only students but any person, to be a source of motivation. And then academic knowledge itself, and then we go back to emotional labor. Academic knowledge is a source of climate anxiety, and what we study here, it is a big source of climate emotions in general, not only climate. The second main theme is related to experiences and expectations toward the university environment. And that is also very much related to emotional labor and our discussions that we had in the first part of the seminar. They are frustrated. They are frustrated on academia. They think that we are lacking adequate action here and in general in the world. I wonder if at CEMUS you have the same atmosphere sometimes when students at your sessions they claim that we are not doing enough. Do you have such discussions or no?
Like that they claim that academia specifically is not doing enough, like, or that CEMUS or.
No. I mean, we as humanity.
Yes, that's the predominant discussion.
Are they mentioning academia in this regard?
I think, in the sense, academia as part of people with power, in some sense, or yeah. I don't know what your experience is.
Yeah, I would say maybe more companies and capitalism than academia.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they really request community of practice. As I have already mentioning, they really want us teachers to be mentors, not knowledge providers. They want this peer-to-peer feedback and reflections, and they request more time. They also want the education not be only technical, but they want their emotions to be recognized in the classroom. And that is interesting. We are now publishing the second paper about what teachers think about that. And teachers, they have very different perspectives on that. Some say that, emotions should not be really expressed in the classroom. And some say, yes, it is fine and it is part of academia to host the emotional side. And I wonder, what is your opinion on that? Because it was very interesting to do interviews with teachers. They are sometimes very radical in like, no, it's not appropriate to be emotional in the classroom as a teacher. And some say that it is like inevitable because we are social animals and we are emotional animals, meaning humans. Are you allowing yourself to express emotions in the classroom while teaching?
I can speak on behalf of like students. I think I would appreciate like professors talking about their emotions, and it would help them with the emotional labor as well. And I think it would connect the students and the teachers more, especially when sometimes it's like they don't the students feel like the academia or like the institutions or people with power don't take climate change seriously. I think it would be much more connecting for teachers to express their emotions.
Yeah.
I would say that if I express my emotions, I'm afraid the students won't express their emotions to me because they will take my emotions into considerations. You see what I mean? If you have a relationship with the students, you don't want them to know all of your emotions because they won't approach you because they won't want to bother you because they feel. Do you see what I mean? So to me, I wouldn't express all of my emotions, some emotions, but it's not I see it. I don't see it as my role in the classroom.
Yeah, some teachers in the interviews, they said that they want to somehow motivate students to take some actions to try to change the world for better. And that is why they are refraining from whatever their own personal reflections on like negative scenarios that we have in the world and where we are coming to. So it's kind of also like internal conflict whether to show all your personal frustration in relation to climate change and actions and yeah, or to try to, yes, like we can do it. We will manage that. Yeah. I see lots of interesting comments in the chat. Unfortunately, we don't have much time to really embrace all of that. But But yeah, maybe we can actually have the chat discussion also somehow attached to the recordings later. I would be very interesting to like go through all those comments as well. But now we are coming to the last part of this sadly very short seminar that is about what we can actually do with all of that. We have formulated some consequences for practice in our small research, and then I was also looking what kind of ways out exist in terms of emotional labor published in scientific literature. So, and then they are very much in line with what we have drawn to in our research. So this is first that we suggest in our paper is that we should really rethink our operations in academia to build spaces for emotions and acknowledge emotional work. I know that CEMUS, you were hosting some climate emotions related sessions for students a couple of years ago, and that was very much appreciated by students. Maybe you do something like that now. I'm not sure, but it is something that is very, very much welcomed by students usually. Time economies, that's a very painful part. Of course, we are claiming that academia should rethink time economies around all of its operations, but it's really hard. I know that, for example, in University of Bern, some academic staff, they like really work 4 times a day. I don't know it is for the whole university or it's only some of them. But yeah, we should somehow manage our time burden because we're constantly stressed in this regard. And then students expect that educational environment around sustainability issues should be on human scale, involving personal contacts between students, teachers and learners, creating different forms of educational and practical communities. So it's about mentorship, it's about peer support, it's about being more humanistic. And that is related to the next point, that is about mentoring and supervisions that they need, and we also need some supervision and some support and mentor support. And then maybe we should go outdoors more. Maybe we should do teaching on the grass more. You have very, very nice urban garden in your building, as far as I know, that maybe we should do some of the classes outside the university walls to embrace this modern human world. I wonder what kind of ways out do you see in relation to problematic of emotional labor? What would you change in academia to really host our emotional labor better and to host our students' emotions and their expectations in terms of emotional labor? What would you change in this regard?
Would I say something like recreating a sense of community where we are not just mercurial thinkers, but also wholesome human beings? And that could be a vision. It's not happening by decree. Would be like a cultural shift of orientation instead of so much administrative pressure and deadlines and minimax analysis. The idea of a community of scholars where we don't need to have this division between intelligent researchers and not so intelligent students, but we're co-researching and co-teaching, learning as we move.
Yes, yeah, community building, super ancient solution, sometimes hard to organize. People are busy not every time they can come to your meetings, and not everyone is on the same page, but still it's the only best way to proceed, to build a community. Yeah, I totally agree. Mats have been struggling to build our community in our center, and you do a very good job in our Center for Health and Sustainability, and you do know how hard is it to create a community, but it is the only way. Yes. Since unfortunately lack of time, and this is the last slide, I wanted to share what kind of other ways out have been proposed by different researchers in terms of emotional labor problematic in academia. So the first is ethics of care, and care ethics is a moral theory that seeks to maintain relationship by contextualizing and promoting well-being of caregivers and care receivers. So ethics of care, it is something that is proposed to kind of host and like unfold problematics of emotional labor in academia. It is not uniform, it's very situational, it's very relationally complex. It is not solution like pill that will help everyone. And it requires attention to care to the self as both of individual and institutional levels. And you were mentioning that we need to take care about ourselves from emotional perspective at the beginning of the seminar. That is way out. And then more research we need, especially quantitative studies. That is maybe some of you will do. That would be really, really needed. And then training in emotional management. We need to be more trained to manage our emotions and emotions of our students in the classroom. We need to acknowledge emotional labor in different ways. We need to promote well-being more, especially for academic staff, because we have students' health service that is dealing with students' health and well-being, but we have nothing for us. Except in Uppsala University, you can get a refund yearly of 2,000 kroner if you pay for your sports gym. That is absolutely not enough in terms of promoting well-being. And then foster open dialogue. And that is related to what you have said about creating a community and reduce administrative burdens. That is related to what I was mentioning in the previous slide, that we need to and this is something that is maybe impossible to do, but we still need that somehow to be ensured. And embrace neurodiversity. And that is an interesting term that I have learned myself. So neurodiversity, how many of you know this term? It means that, so it's a word used to explain unique ways people's brains work. So while everyone's brains develop similarly, no two brains function just alike. So being neurodivergent means having a brain that works differently from the average neurotypical person. And in academia, we're especially very, very neurodivergent. So we should actively promote neurodiversity and create more inclusive and supportive environment for us here. So that was all from my side. I hope you have got some interesting insights for you, and I'm really, really thankful for your discussion points. And I will read all of the comments in the chat, because it was also a very beautiful discussion, and it's always hard in these hybrid meetings to follow both on-site and online. We should somehow rethink this. Thank you very much for your time and for your participation, and see you around in Uppsala or somewhere in the world.
Thank you, Oleksandra, very much. That concludes today's seminar, and next time, as Daniel has written in the chat, September 23rd, Jesper Olsson from the Department of Literature and Rhetorics. So I'll come back then.